Hello, everyone. Out in Lake Superior, the Great Lakes of America. When there is a discussion about the water shortage, well, you are in the right location. Certainly, so we'll see how the global weather pattern moves, but having a fresh water lake is very important. I am Lawrence Yun, Chief Economist with National Association of Realtors. I was asked by the Lake Superior Association of Realtors to see whether I can provide a quick market update and what I anticipate going into it as we're already in 2026. So I will provide a quick update. So I know that there's some people in the building, also many people who are anticipated to come online. So happy to join you all. A lot of interesting dynamics happening. And certainly for realtors, people who are in the real estate industry, business aspect like title insurance, moving truck business, mortgage originators, it's been a tough 3 years. Tough 3 years because of high interest rate environment. But now we know the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates. They have already done so 3 times last year and probably 3 more times this year. So as the mortgage rate is anticipated to decline, how this will impact the real estate market. So I'm going to put the slide onto the screen and then go into it. So hold 1 second as I find the right slide. So I have the Lake Superior region. Right. So let me first start with a sort of big macro question. Are we headed for economic recession? Because after all, Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate, and when the Federal Reserve cuts interest rate, they're usually doing so because the economy is not in a healthy condition. So the first thing on government is that we had the longest government shutdown back in the September, October of last year. And during that government shutdown, no data was available. And also, it disrupted some of the real estate transaction because when the government shut down, it just means that some of the mortgages for real rural community, people are using the Department of Agriculture mortgage loans to buy property. That is not available during the government shutdown. We know that flood insurance is not available. And also income verification from IRS, those are not available during the shutdown. So it can be disrupted. So with no data coming out in September and October, it was hard to gauge. Now, government, as we know, is reopened, but there could be a second shutdown at end of this month. We know Washington is divided. There's a bickering going on in Washington between Republican and Democrat. So we wonder whether there could be second disruption to the government shutdown and impacting the real estate. Now, stock market is essentially at a record high, but there's increasing question about whether it could be overvalued. So what happens if there is a correction? But I would say the following. The clients of realtors who have purchased property, they're enjoying record high housing wealth, and it appears to be on solid ground. So at least related to housing, one will say that housing wealth is on a solid ground. The job market is showing some weakness, and consumers are expressing unhappiness, and consumers are also beginning to default on some of the loans. So let's see some of these pictures. So this is a stock market, Standard & Poor's 500, and essentially it's a record high condition. But it's not 500 companies that is driving this. It is not the 500 companies, but essentially dozen tech titans who have exposure to artificial intelligence, whether it is a computer chip maker, whether it is, say, the usual suspects of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple. So it is really the tech titans that are driving up the stock market due to artificial intelligence enthusiasm. And one wonders whether or not artificial intelligence companies can turn a profit. Now, artificial intelligence will be with us, just like any technology advances. The question is whether the companies can turn profit in the future. And if the profit does not really flow in, then we may see some stock market correction, which has an impact on the broader economy. Uh, just moving on, consumer sentiment is showing very low figures about the direction of the economy. One interesting part of this graph is that it is even lower than 15 years ago when we had a foreclosure crisis or during the COVID lockdown. So
Mm.
consumers are clearly expressing huge displeasure. And furthermore, we are seeing some economic stress in the market. We are seeing that people are beginning to default on their loans. This is auto loan. Three little hump. The first hump is the foreclosure crisis of 15 years ago. Second hump is COVID lockdown. Now we are not in a recession, but as you can see, somehow the people are now beginning to default on their auto loan condition. Similar situation on credit card debt. People not paying the credit card debt situation. And then student debt situation, which had for a couple of years been zero because government said you don't have to repay student debt. Well, now people have to repay their student debt and people cannot. So we are beginning to see some economic stress. 10 years ago, no one would have thought a declared socialist would easily win mayor's race in New York City or mayor's race in Seattle. But radical, we would have considered completely radical people. They are being elected because maybe some segment of the society are expressing unhappiness and they're defaulting on their loans. So we are seeing this condition where people we would have considered completely radical being elected to public offices because we see some graph that illustrates economic stress. Because of economic stress, Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate. Already did three times last year and more so in the upcoming months. I would say not in January, but probably in March and maybe two more before the summer finishes. So at least Federal Reserve is beginning to cut interest rate cut condition. But the mortgage rate is never a one-to-one relationship with the Federal Reserve. Everybody is focused on the first bullet point, what the Federal Reserve will do. People think Federal Reserve cuts interest rate, mortgage rate will automatically decline. And answer is no. There are many other things that impacts mortgage rate, things like budget deficit, national debt. If we have high national debt, government borrows, mortgage rate cannot go down. Supreme Court will soon decide on the legality of President Trump's tariffs, constitutionality, whether the White House can impose tariff on its own or whether it requires congressional legislation. But one surprising aspect of President Trump's tariff is it's bringing in a lot of revenue, about $3 trillion anticipated over the next 10 years. This is how Washington speaks over a 10-year cycle. So if Supreme Court say President Trump's tariffs are illegal, then we will have larger national debt and higher interest rate environment. So we have to wait and see. Inflation rate always impacts a mortgage rate. High inflation means lenders need to be compensated for loss in purchasing power. So mortgage rate increases. And things like quantitative tightening, whether Federal Reserve is selling or buying. Friday of last week, President Trump instructed Fannie and Freddie to buy mortgage-backed bond. Essentially, President Trump is trying to say, I'm going to bypass the Federal Reserve. I'm going to instruct Fannie and Freddie, who do mortgage-backed securities, to purchase. And this process can help lower mortgage rates. So a lot of dynamics going on. Government guarantee on mortgages are important. Canada, they don't have 30-year fixed rate mortgage because they don't have government guarantee. But in America, we have 30-year fixed rate mortgage because of government guarantee. So in other words, I'm just trying to illustrate mortgage rates are dependent on many factors, even though most everyone is focused on the first bullet point. Everybody think Federal Reserve determined the mortgage rate, and answer is no, that is not the case. There are many other factors. So let me put Federal Reserve decision, which is on the blue line, the same graph that I showed you earlier. So the blue line is the Federal Reserve policy, while the red line is the mortgage rate. what you care about, what your clients care about. So it is not one-to-one relationship, but at least it's moving in the right direction. So over a long term, red line can sort of follow the blue line, even though it is not one-to-one relationship. In fact, mortgage rate right now is close to 6%, which is better than 7% 1 year ago. So January of 2025, 1 year ago, mortgage rates were at 7%. Today it is at 6%. So at least it's moving in the right direction. And we'll see whether there could be further decline in mortgage rate condition. Now, Federal Reserve, interestingly, is cutting interest rate at a time when inflation is not under control. This shows consumer price inflation. That little hump that you see, that's in 2022. You went to the grocery store 3 years ago, it was 4 years ago, and you came out super angry. What the heck happened? Huge inflation. You went to the gas station, everything was expensive. Well, we want to make sure that the prices do not rise so fast, shocking people. And economists would consider 2% inflation or below as ideal. Well, we are not there yet. We're above 2%, yet Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate at this time. And one of the driver of the inflationary pressure is insurance costs. Insurance costs has been really rising, so this has not been fully tamed yet. But because Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate at a time when inflation is not under control, gold prices are taking off, record high. This is of interest for anybody who is investing in gold, or maybe your grandmother, old jewelry, she has gold, she thinks it's worth a certain amount. Well, it is worth a lot today, those gold jewelries. But people are buying gold because as an inflation hedge. I bring this chart. First, it may be of interest on the gold prices, but it also has real estate implication. Real estate throughout human history has also served as an inflation hedge. So I'm not saying the real estate prices will go up like this. For people who are saying home prices will crash by 30%, well, show this chart. If the gold prices are rising, do you really think that real estate prices could crash by 30%? Absolutely not. So this is one counter argument to those people who are saying that real estate prices could crash. Now moving on, job market is softening. How many people are receiving paychecks in America? Steady paycheck, nurses, school teachers, people working in office building, people receiving W-2 statement salaries. Right before COVID, then you see the COVID disruption. But once the economy reopened, more jobs, such that now we have 7.3 million more people receiving paycheck today compared to pre-COVID. Record high. So where is the weakness in the job market? You don't really see it in this graph, but let me put the graph slightly differently. Rather than total jobs, how many new jobs are we adding? Because we know there's college graduates, high school graduates looking for a job. So how many jobs are we adding? And essentially in recent months, it's been essentially zero. Some months positive, other months negative, or if it's positive, it is very slow. And therefore, the Federal Reserve do not want to see this number turn negative, deeply negative, and stay negative and have an economic recession. And that is why the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate. But keep in mind, gold prices are rising. So you have this sort of contradictory situation where Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate in a sense to avert economic recession, but that is lifting some of the inflation hedge assets like gold. And one wonders whether real estate could get some of that action in the future. Now, one big reason as to why the job market is much softer is Elon Musk came to Washington, D.C., where I am, and his job was to slash away unnecessary government spending. So just slashing away at all the government spending. Elon Musk believes that there's a huge fraud in government spending everywhere. We are already seeing in some of the daycare center in Minneapolis, but there could be more condition. So Elon Musk came to Washington to slash away some of the government programs along with federal government employees. So one of the weakness in the job market is, you can say, almost purposeful, that we want to waste government uh, uh, unnecessary government spending condition. So deep decline in federal government employees. Uh, so the interesting part is that even with the job cuts, unemployment rate still remains fairly tight. You see in 2010, first little hump that you see, that's the foreclosure crisis. We had unemployment rate of 10%. Then during COVID, unemployment rate went up to 15%. Now unemployment rate is under 5%, and some people may say this is fine. In a free society where people can look for better jobs, also in a free society where employer can fire incompetent employees, unemployment rate will never be zero. So 5% unemployment rate will be good, and we are below that level. So even we are not adding jobs robustly, unemployment rate still remains low. Among those people with job, again, record high employment, the standard of living is modestly improving. The blue line shows the wage growth, while the red line is consumer price inflation. So if the blue line is higher than the red, their standard of living is improving, and this shows that people's ever so slightly standard of living modestly improving. I also want to bring out this because right now, effectively, southern border crossing is shut down. No one is crossing the southern border from Mexico to the US. And some people are saying that will impact people in the hotel industry, doing the cleaning industry, or maybe in a restaurant where people are doing washing dishes, or in the construction. So this shows the wage levels and wage growth. And I wonder what's going to happen in the upcoming years as the southern border is effectively shut down. I'm not making any commentary about, whether it is a good policy, bad policy, the part, but I'm just looking at potential economic impact of it. And people like Vice President J.D. Vance is saying, look, we don't want foreign workers. We want Americans to receive higher wages. We want Americans to be working at a restaurant. We want Americans to be working at hotels. We want Americans to be working in construction, receiving higher salaries, while some business community may say, no, we need a cheaper wages, more work. So anyway, let's see how all this revolve. But I will be monitoring this situation in the upcoming years, given the southern border is shut down. Now let's look at the job market situation. So job addition right now is happening in most states. So both North Dakota and Minnesota is seeing positive job gain. People in the back cannot see the figure. Minnesota showing 1.3% more job compared to 1 year ago. But orange color is showing no job growth. No job growth in Wisconsin, no job growth in Illinois. So this is a 1 year chart. But I think it is better to look at 5 year chart. So this is how many job addition over the 5 years. Green color states are the superstars. So Texas, Florida, adding jobs strongly. While Minnesota and North Dakota, they're light blue, which means that it's low, it's positive, but a little sluggish. Dark blue would be above national average. Light blue would be below national average. So unfortunately, in both North Dakota and Minnesota, you are adding jobs, but a little sluggishly. South Dakota is actually doing very well. South Dakota is adding, 7.6% more jobs in South Dakota condition. But let's look specifically at your area over time. So this is the Duluth metro market, and the census defined as, I guess, a couple of counties in Wisconsin, one or two counties in Minnesota. Actually, I think I got it wrong here. Is it Wisconsin and Minnesota, or Minnesota and North Dakota, where you are located? Sorry, I never visited your area, so I don't have the geography right, but you know better than I do. So it covers counties in both states. So anyway, in your area, what it shows is that back in 1990, there are about 110,000 people receiving paycheck. Today, it is 135,000, almost record high, not a record high, but still, this would imply there should be more home sales. But you're not getting more home sales because mortgage rates are high. So we need lower mortgage rate to release all this potential pent-up demand to be back into the marketplace. So regarding the real estate, national picture is the following. So first bar is 2019, before COVID, before the arrival of the ugly virus. Then we had 2 years of frenzy, low interest rate, huge demand, multiple offers. Then once the Federal Reserve raised interest rate, sales coming down, and 3 straight years of subpar performance on a nationwide basis. But we also see the similar statistics in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, very, very similar condition where it is well below the pre-COVID conditions. But interestingly, the builders are actually back up to pre-COVID because builders are actively producing inventory. They're back up to pre-COVID condition. And if we look at the clients of realtors, homeowners, they have done very well. Price increases showing a huge gain. Minnesota, 43% price increase from pre-COVID. Wisconsin showing 63% price increase in Wisconsin. Yeah, I see the Lake Superior right there. I think the touch point is between Minnesota and Wisconsin. So Lake Superior region, it's huge price increases all across the country. And because of the price increases, the housing net worth is an all-time high. And solid ground because gold prices are also at a record high, much, much higher than home prices, relatively speaking, the price growth condition. So real estate at a record high condition. This is another way to say we will not have price crash. I mentioned people are defaulting on credit card loans, auto loans, but people are not defaulting on mortgage loans. So mortgage default rate is on the yellow. Red is the foreclosure crisis. Homeowners are doing well. There's very little distressed properties coming onto the market. And one interesting sign, I'm down to my final 2 slides, is that mortgage application to buy a house has been rising throughout 2025. Mortgage application does not mean mortgage approval. Some people got denied. But at lower interest rate, more people will qualify. And also mortgage approval does not mean people bought because they cannot find the right inventory. But with more inventory coming onto the market, mortgage rate going down, I think it's just inevitable. This desire to buy a home will translate into actual purchase of a home in 2026. Let me actually, for the sake of time, go to my final slide here. So the forecast is home sales. We did not see any growth in 2025. Maybe locally, generally, I find it in the more affordable Midwest, you are outperforming the country because of affordability. But home sales forecast in 2026 is really a 14% in my statistical model, which means that in reality, it could be 10% increase or even 20% increase. Because of lower mortgage rate forecast of 6% in 2026 compared to near 7% last year. And housing is a cyclical business. After a downturn, when there is a recovery, it is common to see double-digit percentage gain in home sales. So 14% growth at first glance appears high, but this is normal in a recovery. And second point, even with 14% growth, we are not back to pre-COVID. Employment is back to pre-COVID, but we are not back to pre-COVID in terms of home sales. Another 15% is needed in 2027 to get us back to pre-COVID. So with a lower mortgage rate, more inventory coming onto the market, I think it's fairly reasonable, realistic to anticipate double-digit percentage gain in unit sales. Prices will be much more moderate as more inventory comes onto the market, but the job growth will be a little subpar. But one of the reasons as to why it's subpar is, again, southern border is shut down. jobs are only going to people already in the country, people in the continental US, and not to somebody crossing the southern border. And that's why unemployment rate, I don't think will be rising even with slower job growth, because essentially we're saying the jobs will be going to people currently living in the country and not people who are um, trying to cross the southern border. So anyway, thank you for giving me some time to share some of my thoughts. It looks like a great region geography. I never visited that area, but Lake Superior, you have the fresh water. Certainly, I think with any climate change that may happen, you are in a good position to at least have the access to the fresh water. So thank you very much.
Hey, well, thank you, Dr. Yoon, for that very insightful snapshot. I think, are we able to open the floor up for any questions for a couple minutes?
So I have only 2 more minutes before I go to the next session. So yeah, say 2 questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? No? Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you.